surprise to you. I have a great affection for that time. I mean, they had great cars and great clothes and great ties.
You never know by looking at it.
So here's what I want to know. What is it about that story that, because clearly it's something that you really wanted to do. Why that story? What drew you to it? Bearing in mind that obviously, as you've demonstrated in the new movie, we had moved on from that so much.
Yeah, but I think that sometimes period stories allow you to observe human beings with greater clarity. I mean, I think that, you know, you have to believe that if you do classical theatre, for example, you know, that somehow the contemporary story can sometimes, you know, it's full of references and is that me or is it like me, can sometimes blur the clarity with which you see human beings. And the reason I did it is because that novel is full of deep insight into men and women. And, you know, I was trying to get some of that insight up on screen about the way that men and women are with each other. I think it moves beyond period. I think at a certain point in the, you know, when I look at it now, it seems very, I mean, a scene like that, you know, mouthfuls of dialogue, you know, and long, you know, lines, and very, you know, very entrenched in its period. And yet, as the movie progresses, the sense of period falls away. The period details disappear. The Grand Central Station in the 50s, you know, the New York of the sort of the beginnings of, you know, the sea of hats coming down Wall Street. All of that stuff disappears until it's two men, two people, a man and a woman alone in a room, an empty room, literally an empty room, because they've moved everything out because they think they're moving to Paris, just slugging it out, you know. And it seemed to me that it had the kind of universal, almost mythic power of a piece like Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, or one of those great pieces that transcends its era. That's what I was trying to make, and becomes a kind of classic about men and women of any time, in any period. And that's what I was pushing for. So to me, at the end, you know, the formality of the filmmaking gives way to a looser, more handheld feeling. It becomes more contemporary in a way. And that's what I was striving to achieve. You know?
And if those ideas are, as you say, sort of mythic and timeless, and it's basically spending, you know, headspace with a relationship that's going completely wrong, is that therefore why you wanted to sort of, you know, effectively redress the balance with the next movie, to do something that was the warmer side of it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, I mean, I felt I needed to stay there, but I also felt like, you know, the more you penetrate to the heart of something like Revolutionary Road, and by the way, as I said to you earlier, in Yeats's canon of novels, it's the Revolutionary Road is the optimistic one.
The
comparison with all the other ones, you know, that was the commercial one. You know, the other ones get darker and darker. But once you penetrate to the heart and you live with it and you try to get to the bottom of what the issues are and how, in a way, the characters in Revolutionary Road are trapped in a cycle of hurt and betrayal that starts way beyond their own relationships with their spouses and starts with their parents and, you know, while they were still children, and that's something that the movie dealt with as well. The more depressing, the darker it becomes, and the more you're forced to confront whether you yourself, as a filmmaker, believe what is being articulated by the film. I mean, you know, you go all the way down that road and you think, actually, I'm not sure I do agree with this. You know, I love it, I admire it, you know, but do I think that its philosophy on life, that its larger statement is true? And I think there are parts of it that aren't, but I think there are parts of it, when I got to the end of the process, I thought that aren't, you know, that aren't still true, and that weren't true then necessarily, and that stop it on some level from being a universal statement and remain stuck in period. And I was sort of torn between the two in a way. Anyway, which is as much to say as Away We Go felt more like, yes, this is what I think, this is how I think people muddle through life and survive when they want to survive, despite losing parents or you know, being unmarried or dealing with grief in their life or the struggle of not knowing where to live or not knowing how to bring up a child in the modern world, and what's the point anyway. That you can do it, you know, that there is always a way through. And I think for a time like now when people are having things taken away from them, you know, all over the place, left, right and centre, losing their lives and their livelihoods, I think it's important to have a story. I think you have a duty, in a way, sometimes to tell stories about how you can pick up your life and change it, and it can work, without it being sentimental rubbish. And, you have
There's nothing wrong with sentimentality.
Well, I think that's right. I mean, I think I'm more suspicious of it than most, probably, and have been guilty, certainly, on occasion of going the completely opposite direction and refusing to give an audience an easy catharsis, when probably that's what they needed, I'm thinking of a movie like Jarhead, when, it was almost deliberate lack of catharsis, constantly the things that you expect from a war movie, I'm not going to give you, because the story refuses to give you them.
Well, let's go back and have a look at the scene from American Beauty. We were talking earlier on, and you were saying that you sort of discovered how to make film during the course of American Beauty, and we talked, as everybody always does with that film, about the scene of the bag flying around. It's a cinematic moment, in as much as it's not something that could ever be sort of reproduced in theatre. Do you want to say anything about it before we see it, about what for you is the sort of the magic of them watching the television screen, watching that bag?
Yeah, I mean, it took me a while to realise why the scene had an odd, in my opinion, magic about it. And it took me, I'll tell you some stories that went into the making of it, because it's quite amusing. It took me 3 or 4 goes to get the little digital camera, because basically the character in the movie has shot the plastic bag with his own camera, and he's done it in a parking lot. First of all, the parking lot was wrong, the wall didn't look good, then the bag sort of didn't really dance in the way that I wanted it to dance, and I couldn't get it right, and then I realised that it needed to not just have the bag, but it needed something else moving in the frame. And so I put a load of dead leaves in. I know it sounds so random, but when you see it, the bag is not the only thing dancing, it's the leaves too. It's like it has little sort of footmen with it. And the moment I did that and I changed the colour of the wall, it worked. But the sort of behind the scenes, and I'm not a fan of the demystification of movies that is constantly going on. You have to see the behind the scenes documentary before you see the movie now, and you see you listen to the commentary, and you see the deleted scenes and the making of, and I think that there's a lot of. I remember Conrad Hall, who shot American Beauty and wrote a petition, saying, "What is this thing, about trying to show what goes on behind the making of the movie?" He was horrified when he shot Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid to see a documentary about the making of that, in which you see Newman and Redford jump off the cliff onto a crash mat. He said, we spent months trying to make it look like, they were jumping into a river, and then you're going to show the bloody crash mat, So I think there's a point about that, don't show too many crash mats, and so I haven't talked about that in this scene, hardly at all. But the reality is I shot the digital footage at 4 in the morning in an LA, when I wanted the light to be low, just morning light, in an LA parking lot, and the thing that was making the bag move was 2 enormous hairy-ass grips with fans going on, who just thought I was completely insane. I was some young filmmaker, and there were people walking by going to school thinking, poor guy making a student film, he's just got some idiotic notion. I mean, there's a lot of people blowing a plastic bag around, But then we put it up on the screen, and I delayed shooting the scene because I didn't want. And I didn't want Wes Bentley, who was delivering a speech about the bag, to do the scene until I didn't want him to see what he had shot until we were shooting. In other words, I wanted him to just respond directly to it. And this was the second take. There are several things moving in the frame. There's all the things that you see. There's the movement of the camera, but then there's also a slow push in from our camera, and it's the combination of all of those things, I think, that makes it interesting.
Okay.
What do you think?
Thank you.